with the growing public understanding of ADHD and other neurodivergent profiles, many of us are starting to wonder whether our own scattered focus might be a symptom of something similar. An honest answer is that it might be, but it might also be something else entirely, pointing us toward the same fundamental observation and a similar toolkit. Many of us were taught, implicitly or explicitly, that attention is a matter of willpower. We are either disciplined or distracted. We either focus as we should, as we are told, or we. If we struggle to concentrate, the story goes, there's something we need to fix about our habits, our phone use, our morning routine, or bedtime ritual. But this overly simplified view can cause a lot of unnecessary suffering. If we look at it more closely, the concept of attention is similar to the concept of a bandwidth of capacity. Attention can be directed, diverted, divided, stretched thin, redistributed, and depleted. It can also be hijacked by the right sound, the right notification, the right flash of color on a screen without awareness, much less consent. Attention is not a switch under the finger of intention. We can think of it more as a dynamic, invisible container that allocates resources across everything competing for it at any given moment. There is also an important distinction worth making early as we talk about attention. Two time frames, a longer and a shorter one. The first one is our baseline pattern, the way our nervous system tends to allocate focus by default. This is relatively stable in the long term. The second one is our current state, the resources we actually have available right now in this context. This can vary significantly from time to time. These two time frames are not the same thing, yet the way we often refer to attention routinely collapses them into one. When our state is depleted, it can look from the outside and even feel from the inside like a trait failure, like we are just bad at this. We are probably not simply bad at this, it is likely we are running on an empty tank. And especially for some, this distinction carries particular weight. Individuals whose attention is interest-based rather than importance-based, people who find that focus arrives bottom-up and motivation is drawn more by what genuinely engages rather than what performs a social persona, these people already know the gap between these two layers intimately. When our state is depleted, what gets lost first is precisely the capacity to find genuine engagement. Without that, focus doesn't just become harder, it becomes functionally inaccessible. Not through lack of intention, but through fundamental differences in our neurobiopsychological wiring. Attention is not a personality trait, it is a complex, sensitive regulation system for resource allocation. And the world we inhabit, as it currently works, is not a neutral place for information exchange, it is an attention economy. It is a system in which our attention is the resource being extracted, packaged, and sold to advertisers. The platforms we use for several hours every day, social media, news feeds, messaging apps, these are not simply designed to serve our conscious intentions. Such digital tools and services are designed to maximize the time, the effort, and or money we invest on them by passing conscious intentions when possible and profitable. They are engineered to benefit from hooking on our attention, to keep it coming back. This is the business model social platforms are built on. These are the principles their behavioral design is based on, neatly presented in Nir Eyal's book, Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. Social validation loops, like the reactions, the likes, and the view counts, provide irregular, unpredictable rewards, which is exactly the pattern most effective at sustaining compulsive behavior. Variable reward timing, as in maybe this next notification is important or maybe this next scroll will deliver something good, this is not accidentally compelling. It is a concept well understood by the developers of Las Vegas, fundamental for the mechanism that makes slot machines difficult to walk away from. Behavioral psychology and contemporary neuroscience both suggest that intermittent or uncertain rewards can powerfully affect behavior motivation. Building on Skinner's fundamental work on operant conditioning, which is the shaping of behavior by imposing positive and negative consequences, modern dopamine research also indicates that reward uncertainty and anticipation amplify incentive peaks and behavioral persistence, helping explain why maybe this time can become such a strong motivational force. For individuals whose nervous systems are already wired toward novelty, immediate feedback, and a dopamine sensitive reward processing, this design can hit differently. The pull is often stronger because these attention economy systems were precisely engineered to exploit the same vulnerabilities that are most pronounced in ADHD profiles. The fact that they work well enough on pretty much everyone is what makes them ubiquitous. But the fact that they work harder on some individuals is what makes them a specific concern for neurodivergent folks navigating an already attention demanding world. Let's consider, for the sake of this conversation, a virtual attention tank somewhere deep in our cognitive foundations, far below the surface of awareness. Any single escaping drop is inconsequential. We would never notice the leak. But over hours, days, and weeks, the reservoir slowly empties. And when we eventually reach for something that requires a full tank, for example, a session of short but deep focus, something that requires emotional presence, a difficult conversation, a creative problem, an emergency demanding speed and precision, there's nothing there. We realize we are depleted without necessarily being able to point to a specific why. And this is what the demanding attention economy we live in does. Not through one traumatic drain, but through dozens of small, undetectable leaks. The notification interruption seems minor because it only took 3 seconds to check, but research consistently shows that the cognitive cost is not only the 3 seconds of reviewing it, it is also the recovery window. The return to a state of genuine focus after an interruption is not immediate, nor is it tax-free. And many of us are interrupted and then need to return to the previous task more than a couple of times a day, plus taxes. Passive scrolling loops, they drain us differently. They consume resources without providing closure. We finish or interrupt a scroll feeling vaguely unsatisfied, not because the content was bad, but because the format was designed to continue indefinitely. There is no natural endpoint, so the loop doesn't close uh, like it would close if we would put down a magazine or a book. It just stops, leaving an open attention circuit that pulls attention back toward the screen. Social comparison triggers. They are quieter but more costly. The moment of comparison itself may last seconds. The rumination that often follows, the low level background processing of where we stand in life, how we are perceived, what we are missing, agonizing questions. Is the neighbor's grass greener? Is their dog cuter? You know the drill. This can run for hours off platform, consuming attention resources we didn't know were being used. and probably didn't consciously decide to spend. We also have this ambient connectivity anxiety, the diffused, always on stress of being perpetually reachable. Even when we are not actively checking, part of our nervous system is listening. The possibility of an incoming message, a missed notification, an unanswered email, all these can create a low-grade background vigilance state that never fully resolves to free up the reserved resources. For those of us who already carry a heavier context switching cost, for example, autistic individuals whose re-entry into focus requires rebuilding the conditions that made focus possible in the first place, these leaks compound differently. An interruption is not just an interruption. It is the dismantling of a carefully calibrated processing executing environment that was genuinely difficult to construct and will need to be constructed again and again from scratch with fewer resources every time. This is not a lack of individual resilience. This is a feature of how interest-based, bottom-up processing systems function and how they are put under significant stress in seemingly normal conditions. Understanding and identifying our own attention leaks is a good place to start. What we do about such leaks is what the rest of this piece is for. Let's talk about 3 responses to attention leaks in order. This section is, of course, not a list of productivity tips. It is a layered framework, and the sequence of the layers matters as much as the content. We cannot develop a clear relationship with our own attention patterns while still operating in depleted and low awareness conditions. This means we need to develop a deeper understanding of our own attention allocation and leakage patterns, the status of our resource tanks, the demands of our environments, and how all these factors interact. We don't need a judgmental list of what we know we're doing wrong, but a genuinely curious observation of what is actually happening. When do we notice depletion arriving before it tips into dysregulation? Which platforms or relationships or contexts or places are our highest volume leaks? What does our attention feel like when it's working? What are some indications that we are functioning well enough? And what conditions support that? Attention is not a matter of cognitive effort simply. The resources required for sustained cognitive focus are downstream of psychological and emotional regulation. When we are anxious, grieving, overstimulated, or simply running on poor sleep, cognitive attention is often the first casualty. Not because we have poor focus or time management skills, but because the nervous system has correctly prioritized something else. Understanding this means that maybe next time we can skip pathologizing or even perpetuating our own depletion and prioritize responding to it accurately. In order to increase focus, locating and reducing wasted streams of attention is critical. And it is a behavior we can direct at negotiating change with the environment, not changing the person. Parts of the environment routinely drain our resources. Identifying and addressing those first is a reasonable, proportionate response. Practically, this can feel like saying no. It can feel like rejecting the default settings in exchange for value reciprocity. And that's what it is, an actionable no. Since so many of us spend long hours in the digital realm, it can look like turning off all non-essential apps and notifications, unsubscribing from non-essential services and newsletters, unfollowing social accounts, profiles, pages, and channels that generate uncertainty, anxiety, rumination, or simply add to the information noise without offering genuine value. Consolidating communication channels, so we are not ambient monitoring 12 of them simultaneously. And it can look like creating friction, making it intentionally harder to access high stimulation apps, as in moving them off our home screen, logging out, using screen time tools, whatever works, not as a negative reinforcement intervention, but as speed bumps to install opportunities for momentary reflection before action. For autistic and ADHD profiles specifically, blocking major attention leaks as such to protect the available capacity is the intervention. Managing, filtering, and resisting endless minor distractions in real time is exactly what is most cognitively expensive for nervous systems that rely on interest, proximity, and novelty to direct and sustain engagement. When the incoming volume of distraction requests is lower, as a result of our no, the executive function demand drops accordingly as a result of consistently reducing noise and increasing signal. Once we have reduced the volume, tools and practices can actually take hold, not before. The sequence matters because tools applied to an unaddressed environment tend to fail and confirm the story that we are the problem and we are doing it wrong. For example, time blocking works when it's organized around our natural rhythm, not as a generic productivity template. Single tasking commitments are sustainable when the environment isn't actively working against them, obviously. Body doubling, which is working in the physical or digital presence of another person with no constant interaction demands. This functions as a nervous system co-regulation channel that lowers the threshold for task initiation. This is not a hack or a workaround. It is a legitimate research consistent strategy that works with how human nervous systems regulate through social presence. And of course, we have sensory insulating or sensory stimulating tools and behaviors. The question is not which productivity system is best. It is which tools are compatible with how our attention actually functions, not how we wish it functions, not how our colleagues' attention functions. Interest-based attention systems do not respond well to rigid scheduling, abstract requests or deadlines, or tasks that have been stripped of visible impact. They respond well to structure that preserves a degree of choice, tasks with clear and proximate outcomes, and environments that support momentum rather than demanding it from scratch each time. And of course, this is not simply an individual issue. This layer is about knowing, understanding how our attention works well enough to work with it, protect it, and advocate for the needed conditions. A narrow framing of focus difficulties as individual failure is neither incidental nor accidental. It reflects a common narrative embraced by systems which benefit more from people managing symptoms rather than questioning the design of their environment. Attention awareness at its fullest involves an economical understanding and a political stance. It means recognizing that our attention is a valuable and finite resource being actively competed for by external entities with significant investment in winning that competition. Choosing, where possible, imperfectly, to allocate our attention according to our own values and priorities rather someone else's algorithm or agenda is a meaningful act of self-determination. For neurodivergent people, this reframing carries specific weight. The script many of us have lived with is not objective. It is a script written through frameworks that treat the neurotypical average as an equivalent for universal gold standard and then over standardize policies and norms around that, disproportionately increasing compliance demands for neurodivergent folks. Self advocation here means challenging these narratives that don't challenge the environments and relationships benefiting from neurodivergent traits, qualities, and skills, but failing to reciprocate. What if we thought of our attention not as a performance metric to be optimized, but as an ecology, a living inner garden that needs nourishment, rest, and the occasional clearing of overgrowth, so that what actually matters to us has room to grow, take root, and eventually fruit. Ecologists don't respond well to maximum extraction. They collapse under it. They recover when conditions support recovery. Our attention is finite. It is also ours. We don't need more discipline applied to a depleted system. We need the leaks sealed and the weeds cleared so that when we reach for the focus, the presence, the creative depth that actually matters to us, something is there, something we grew.